"You will be mine for the 90 days of winter," ordered the cruel duke after buying her. But welcome, dear listeners, to a journey through time and the human heart. This is the story of two souls imprisoned, not by iron chains but by chains far heavier, those of the past, of pride and of revenge. Have you ever wondered how long it takes to turn hatred into love, to convert wounds into healing, for the harshest winter to finally give way to spring? In this narrative, we will discover that sometimes all it takes is 90 days. 90 days of humiliation, resistance, silent battles, and subtle surrenders. Days where every gaze carries storms, every silence echoes louder than screams, and every minimal gesture can change destinies. This is the story of Lady Saraphina Winters, a high society woman reduced to a servant who never allowed her dignity to be bent, and of Duke Nikolai Volkov, a man who bought a woman's time for revenge but ended up losing his heart in the process. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching us from? Leave your city, your country in the comments. I love knowing who is crossing this emotional journey with me. And if you appreciate deep stories about redemption, dignity, and the transformative power of love, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. It helps me continue bringing narratives that touch the soul. Now take a deep breath, light a candle if you can, prepare your heart. Let's begin. Year 1887, City, London, England. At the height of the Victorian era, where honor was worth more than gold and reputation was the only shield against social ruin, the rain fell over London like icy tears from a sky that witnessed but did not judge. Each drop beat against the high windows of the salon with melancholic insistence, creating a melody that seemed to lament what was about to happen. Inside, high society gathered, expensive perfumes mixing with the smell of beeswax candles, of French wines opened hours ago to breathe, of ambition and secrets kept under kid gloves and rehearsed smiles. Silver candelabras cast golden light that danced on the blood-red damask-lined walls. It was an event not listed on official invitations, one of those rituals the elite practiced in the shadows, far from the eyes of the public morality they so fervently proclaimed to defend in the light of day. It was an auction, but not of purebred horses, inherited jewels, or properties in strategic regions. Of people, of souls, of temporary destinies. Saraphina Winters stood on the improvised stage, just a wooden platform covered by a faded Persian rug, as if the attempt to add dignity to the act only highlighted its cruelty. Her hands were clasped in front of the midnight blue velvet dress, the very one she had worn to the last ball before the fall. The fabric had seen better days. There was an almost imperceptible patch on the left sleeve, but she wore it like armor, as a final declaration that she still belonged somehow to the world that now watched her with voyeuristic hunger. Her amber-colored eyes, an inheritance from the mother who had died when she was 15, scanned the crowd without seeking pity. She did not beg with her gaze, did not lower her head in silent supplication. She just registered faces. Lady Pemberton, who had taken tea in her home countless times, now averted her gaze with theatrical embarrassment. Lord Hastings, who had courted her cousin last summer, watched with an interest that was anything but chivalrous. Countess Warwick, whispering behind her ivory fan, eyes shining with the malicious satisfaction of someone seeing a social rival finally humiliated. 26 years old, an age considered almost too late for marriage in the world she was born into, but which she had always seen as liberation. Enough time to read, to think, to exist outside the expectations that society imposed like gilded cages. Daughter of an aristocratic lineage that had crumbled like a house of cards under relentless reign, her father, Lord Edmund Winters, dead 2 years now in circumstances the newspapers prudishly called a weak heart, but which everyone knew was a combination of heartbreak, drink, and debts that crushed like the weight of mountains. He had left a poisoned legacy, debts that snaked like venomous ivy through every corner of the family's life, secrets buried so shallowly that the first heavy rain would expose them, and 2 children adrift in a world that did not forgive financial failures, no matter how aristocratic the blood. Her younger brother, Thomas, only 22, with eyes still too naive for the cruel world they lived in, had accumulated gambling losses. Not just losses, but astronomical debts to men who did not accept flowery apologies and empty titles as payment. Worse, he had been accused of cheating. The evidence was circumstantial, the witnesses questionable. But in that world, a stained reputation was a definitive sentence. The choice presented to Saraphina had the cruelty of an etiquette guillotine, 90 days of contractual servitude, a polite term for temporary slavery, or Thomas's imprisonment and the complete, irrevocable destruction of the Winters name. Not just poverty, not just a social fall, but obliteration. The family would be erased from society's records as if they had never existed. She had chosen the sacrifice, as she always had since her mother died, and someone needed to be strong, to be the pillar, to be the one who didn't break even when everything was falling apart. The auctioneer, a thin man with a waxed mustache and a voice that reverberated off the mahogany-paneled walls like a bell announcing condemnations, announced the terms with cold legal precision. 90 days of complete domestic service, rendered at the choice and command of the buyer. The lady maintains her physical honor intact, as per the sacred laws of British chivalry. Her virtue will not be sullied. Only her pride, her time, her will. Gentlemen, who offers for this singular opportunity? The bid started low, almost insulting. Bored gentlemen seeking novelties for their mansions. Some scandalous story to share in exclusive clubs while smoking Cuban cigars and laughing at a misfortune. 3 days. A week. 15 days, and not even that. But then a voice cut through the air like a newly sharpened blade, silencing the murmurs instantly. 90 days. All of them. Name your price. The ensuing silence had a physical density, a weight that pressed on the chest. Heads turned like coordinated puppets to the back of the salon, where shadows clung to the velvet curtains like secrets. A man rose from there, not walked, emerged as if the shadows themselves had birthed him for this moment. Tall, very tall, forcing gazes to rise to meet his face. Broad shoulders under a flawlessly cut black coat by a tailor who charged the equivalent of a common worker's annual salary. Hair as dark as a moonless night, combed back with military precision, revealing a high forehead and a face of severe lines that could have been sculpted from granite by Renaissance masters. Beautiful, in an almost painful, angular, relentless way. But it was the eyes that held, that burned, grey like Russian winter ice, like iron forged in ancestral furnaces, like storms over the North Sea, and they were fixed on Saraphina with an intensity she felt physically, a weight, a touch without contact, a promise of terrible and inevitable things. Duke Nikolai Volkov. The name echoed in social circles, always accompanied by whispers, fear barely disguised as respect. 34 years old, though he looked simultaneously younger and infinitely older, physical youth preserved, but eyes that had witnessed too much, suffered too much. Born in Russia during a time of turmoil that still marked his military posture, naturalized English after a family tragedy that few dared to mention in his presence. Wealthy beyond the comprehension of common mortals, fortunes in real estate spread across 3 continents, investments in railways, mines, merchant ships. But wealth without joy, fortune without pleasure, feared for his legendary coldness in business, where competitors learned too late that he made no empty threats, had no mercy, offered no second chances. They said he never smiled, that he had no heart, only ice where something human should beat, that women tried to seduce him with promises of everything, and he dismissed them with glacial indifference, as if they were less interesting than financial reports. That strong men trembled when his name was mentioned in disputes. Saraphina knew him. Not personally. Their social orbits rarely crossed. He circled at stratospheric altitudes even for the aristocracy. But she knew him by sight, from balls where she danced with suitable suitors, and he stood on the margins watching everything with eyes that catalogued weaknesses like an eagle identifying prey. From dinners where nervous hosts tried to impress him, and he remained impassive, polite just enough not to insult, distant enough to remind everyone he was there by choice, not necessity. But there was something different in his gaze now, recognition, calculated purpose. He was not there by chance, had not decided to join the auction on an impulse of aristocratic boredom. This had been planned, premeditated. She was the target. But why? The auctioneer, sweat shining on his forehead even in the cool October hall, voice trembling slightly before the Duke's intimidating presence, announced with a reverence that bordered on nervous adoration, "Sold to His Grace the illustrious Duke Nikolai Volkov." Discreet ritualized applause. Whispers exploded like a swarm of wasps. Speculations, instant gossip, stories being invented in real time to be shared tomorrow in tea rooms and private clubs. "Did you hear? Volkov bought her completely. All 90 days. Why does he want her? Could it be? Do you think he—" Saraphina descended from the stage with measured, controlled movements. Each step was a declaration of silent war. Every inch covered an act of resistance. Her head remained high, not arrogance but a refusal to let them break something essential in her. Shoulders back, spine straight, chin high enough to challenge without openly provoking. "You can buy my time," every movement said, "but never ever my soul. Nikolai awaited her at the foot of the narrow wooden staircase that connected the improvised stage to the hall. Up close he was even more intimidating, not just physical height, but a presence that occupied emotional space, that sucked the oxygen, that commanded attention without asking. She could see details that the distance hid, the subtle scars on his hands, marks of past violence or just life's accidents, the tense line of his jaw under a perfectly trimmed stubble, the polar void of his eyes that seemed to look through her, beyond her, to something only he saw, a small scar above his left eyebrow, whitened by time, lips that seemed to have not known a genuine smile in decades, skin lightly tanned even in the London winter, as if recently returned from sunnier lands, and a scent, exotic spices, leather, fireplace smoke, and something indefinable that was simply masculinity distilled into an essence. He held out a thick parchment document, the ink still wet and shining in the candlelight. A contract, legal, binding, brutal in its clarity. Sign, he didn't ask. He ordered. His voice was a third instrument of intimidation, low, controlled, with a slight Russian accent, rounding certain vowels, making commands even more absolute. Saraphina took the gold pen offered by the nervous auctioneer, dipped it in the crystal inkwell, quickly read the terms. Cold, legal, brutally clear in their expectations. 90 days. Complete servitude. Unquestionable obedience. Punishments for insubordination to be determined by the employer. No way out except abandonment of the agreement, which would result in Thomas's immediate arrest and absolute family ruin. A cage with bars of legal words. She signed with a firm hand, the same one her Swiss governess had spent years perfecting. Saraphina Elizabeth Winters. Each letter a declaration. I exist, I choose. Even here, even now, this is my choice. Then she raised her gaze slowly, deliberately to meet his. Amber against grey ice, fire and frost. Two forces of nature colliding. So you may buy my time, Your Grace, she said in a low voice, modulated so only he would hear through the salon's buzz. But you will never buy my submission. For a fraction of a second, so brief she would later question if it really happened, something passed through his eyes. Surprise, irritation, or perhaps, just perhaps, something that could be reluctant respect, recognition of a worthy adversary. Then the mask of ice returned, thicker, more impenetrable. 90 days, he replied, each word weighing like a hammer on an anvil. We shall see who is right in the end. The carriage that took her from the life she knew, imperfect but hers, to the absolute. Unknown had the Volkov crest engraved in polished silver on the varnished mahogany door. The interior smelled of new leather, waxed wood and unapologetic power, crimson velvet cushions, curtains that could be drawn for complete privacy, cold foot warmers, luxury, but luxury as a gilded cell. Saraphina watched London pass by the impeccably clean glass window, the wet streets reflecting gas lamps like fallen stars in the muck, the Thames snaking like a black vein through the city, bridges arching over dark waters that carried secrets and the bodies of suicide society preferred to forget. People hurrying under umbrellas, common lives, common problems, free from contracts that sold days like merchandise. Nikolai sat opposite her, watching not the city but her, studying, cataloguing, trying to understand the enigma he had bought, but clearly hadn't expected. She did not cry. Tears would be a premature defeat. She did not tremble. Visible weakness would be ammunition for an enemy she didn't yet fully understand. She just counted mentally, methodically, as she had counted the days since her mother died, and someone needed to maintain control, order, sanity. Day 1, complete. 89 days to freedom, or transformation, or destruction. Only time would tell which. And as the carriage rolled through the London night, taking her to the mansion that would be her prison and perhaps, eventually, something impossible to name yet, Saraphina made a silent promise to herself. He can buy my time. He can command my movements. He can order my tasks. But my soul, that part of me that is irrevocably mine, that he will never ever have, unless I choose to give it. And I have not yet decided if he deserves such a gift. The Volkov mansion rose on the banks of the Thames like a fortress of grey stone, Gothic towers cutting the cloudy sky. Gardens that were once splendid now grew wild, unpruned rose bushes intertwining in abandoned arches. There was beauty there, but it was a melancholic beauty, of something that had been loved and then forgotten. Saraphina was led not through the main gate, but through the back entrance. The message was clear. She was not a visitor, she was temporary property. Mrs. Caldwell, the housekeeper, received her with eyes that had seen 3 decades of household secrets. She was a middle-aged woman, grey hair pulled into a severe bun, but there was kindness in the wrinkles around her mouth. This way, lady. Forgive me, she corrected herself, uncomfortable. Miss Winters. Saraphina just nodded. Titles were veils. Losing them exposed who we really were underneath. The designated room was in the attic, accessible by narrow wooden stairs that creaked with every step. Tiny, an iron bed, a worn dresser, a small window that framed the sky like a painting framed in peeling wood. The aroma was of dried lavender and loneliness. His Grace will request your presence in an hour, Mrs. Caldwell informed, leaving a simple maid's uniform on the bed. Grey cotton, unadorned. He has rules. When the housekeeper left, Saraphina touched the rough fabric. She had worn silks, velvets, Egyptian linens. Now this, she undressed slowly, each layer removed like the skin of a former life. The uniform felt uncomfortable against her skin, not for its texture but for its symbolism. She looked at herself in the small, cracked mirror. The same face, the same amber eyes. But something had already changed. The Duke's study smelled of leather, cigar smoke, and something indefinable. Perhaps power, perhaps just masculinity distilled in a room. Nikolai stood by the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back, watching the flames dance. He did not turn when she entered. The rules, he began, his voice like velvet over iron, are simple. You will attend to my domestic needs. You will serve meals, organize my belongings, accompany me when I order it. You will sleep in the designated quarters. You will wear the clothes provided. You will address me as Your Grace or Sir. You will not question. You will not argue. You will obey. Silence. Only the crackling of the fire. Finally he turned. In the firelight, his face had something diabolical, or perhaps just all too human, sculpted by the pain he kept under iron control. Do you understand? Saraphina met his eyes. And what is the rule for when you are wrong? His jaw tensed. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides, stopping so close she could feel the heat emanating from him, the tension vibrating like a violin string. I'm never wrong. She held his gaze, did not retreat an inch. Then these will be a very instructive 90 days for Your Grace. A muscle pulsed in his temple. For a moment it seemed he would explode. Shouts, threats, a demonstration of power. But then something shifted in his expression. Something that might have been reluctant respect, or perhaps just deeper irritation. Dismissed, he said coldly. We begin tomorrow. Saraphina gave a minimal curtsy, enough not to be insubordination, insufficient to be true submission, and left. On the stairs back to the attic, her heart beat erratically. Not from fear, but from something more dangerous, recognition. He expected to break her. She knew this as she knew winter followed autumn. But there had been a spark in his eyes when she challenged his words, a spark that said a part of him, buried under layers of ice, desired exactly that. To be challenged, to be seen, to be forced to be more than the monster he had decided to be. 88 days. The first dinner was a test and theatre. Nikolai hosted guests, lords, barons, businessmen with ambitions larger than their scruples. The table gleamed with French porcelain, Bohemian crystal, silver cutlery with the Volkov crest. Saraphina was instructed to serve. She entered carrying the tureen as if it were a crown, not a burden. She served each guest with a grace that years of aristocratic education had engraved in her movements. No one commented on her fall from status, not openly, but the look said it all. Poor Lady Winters, how far she has fallen. Count Ashford, a middle-aged man with more wine than blood in his veins, followed her with eyes that undressed. When she leaned in to serve his plate, he commented loud enough for the table to hear, "Volkov, my dear fellow, you've always had good taste in acquisitions. This one is especially delicious." Discreet laughter. Saraphina felt the blush rise up her neck, but she kept her face impassive. That's when it happened. While serving the Count again, her hand trembled. The scalding soup spilled directly into the man's lap, staining his expensive trousers, making him roar and jump from his chair. "You clumsy wench," he bellowed, face red with fury and pain. Absolute silence. All eyes on Saraphina. She set the tureen aside, picked up a napkin and offered it, her voice perfectly calm. "My sincerest apologies, my lord. How careless of me." But her eyes, when they met his for an instant, said clearly, it was not carelessness. Nikolai rose slowly, napkin falling from his lap. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Saraphina," he said in a dangerously soft voice, "wait for me in the hall." She left, head held high, as whispers exploded behind her like fireworks after the main show. In the hall she waited. Minutes felt like hours. Finally the door opened. Nikolai emerged, dismissing his guests with cold excuses. When the door closed, he turned to her. "You challenged my authority in front of my guests." "No, sir," she replied calmly. I defended my honor. You may buy me, but you cannot sell my respect to your friends as after-dinner entertainment. His eyes flashed. Anger. Yes, but also something else. Disconcert. He had expected tears, apologies, perhaps even desperate seduction to escape punishment. Not this, never this. Go to your room, he ordered, his voice sharp. No dinner. As you wish, Your Grace. She curtsied and began to climb the stairs, but she paused, turning back slightly. Sir, I have known worse hunger. A hunger for dignity. He didn't reply. He just stood watching her ascend, a figure of grey fading into the shadows, leaving him alone with thoughts that refused to be silent. That night in the attic, Saraphina opened the narrow window. The cold London air rushed in, carrying the smell of impending rain and chimney smoke. Her stomach rumbled, but she was smiling. Small victories, small rebellions. 90 days seemed simultaneously an eternity and the blink of an eye. 87 to go. Free hours were scarce, fragments of time between tasks that Nikolai invented more to keep her busy than out of real need. But Saraphina learned to steal moments, to exist in the spaces between his orders. That was how she discovered the West Wing. Rarely used, according to Mrs. Caldwell. The Duke didn't like anyone venturing there. But curiosity was a trait Saraphina had never managed to suffocate, even when prudence advised otherwise. The hallway smelled of mildew and abandoned memories. Portraits of Volkov ancestors watched with painted eyes. Men in military uniforms, women in low-cut gowns, all with that same icy intensity in their gazes. But one portrait was covered, a black velvet cloth thrown over the gilded frame, hiding whoever had been immortalized there. Saraphina looked around. The hallway was empty, just dust dancing in shafts of sunlight that forced their way through the heavy curtains. She pulled back the velvet. A woman stared back at her, young, perhaps 30 when she posed, hair as blonde as wheat under a summer sun, blue eyes that carried a deep sadness even in the painting, an emerald green ball gown, a pearl necklace, beautiful in an ethereal, almost ghostly way. Lady Elena Volkov, a voice behind her said softly. Saraphina almost dropped the velvet. She turned to find Mrs. Caldwell, hands clasped in front of her apron. The Duke's mother, the housekeeper continued, approaching. She took her own life 16 years ago. The air left Saraphina's lungs. Mrs. Caldwell looked at the portrait with eyes that had witnessed the tragedy. There was a scandal. Your father, Lady Winters, forgive me, just miss, was involved. Accusations of adultery, destruction of reputation. Eleanor couldn't bear the social shame. One morning we found her. The housekeeper paused, unable to finish. Saraphina looked at the portrait again. Elena Volkov, a woman destroyed not by truth but by perception. And her father. My father did this? She whispered. It was complex. Business disputes, social vendettas. Your father planted the seeds of suspicion. Society did the rest. Eleanor was fragile, already predisposed to melancholy. The gossip was like a slow poison. Understanding descended upon Saraphina like an icy rain. All of this. Nikolai wasn't just satisfying a whim. He was executing a meticulously planned revenge. She was the last Winters available for his retribution. He hates me, she murmured more to herself. He hates what your father represented, Mrs. Caldwell corrected gently. Whether he hates you specifically, I don't know yet, but I've seen how he looks at you. It's something more complicated. That night, Saraphina couldn't sleep. Near 3 in the morning, she went down to get some water. As she passed the West Wing, she saw light leaking from under a door. She approached silently. Through the crack, she saw Nikolai. He was standing before the now uncovered portrait, a bottle of whiskey in one hand, his gaze lost in his mother's painted face. His shoulders were slightly slumped, a posture he would never let others see. Raw vulnerability. Forgive me, Mama, he whispered to the painting. But I must do this. I must. His voice broke. Saraphina felt something tighten in her chest. This man, this feared Duke, was just a boy still mourning his mother. A boy who had turned pain into armor, tears into ice. She did not enter, did not console. Instead, she took the shawl she was carrying and left it carefully on the sideboard near the door, where he would find it. A small gesture, infinitesimal, but saying, I saw your humanity and I do not use it against you. She returned to the attic and for the first time since she had arrived, she cried. Not for herself, but for all of them. Elena, Nikolai, even her own flawed father, trapped in spirals of pain that only generated more pain. Someone needed to break the cycle. 83 days remaining. Organize my library. The order came during breakfast, Nikolai not even looking up from the morning paper. Saraphina inclined her head in assent and went to assess the task. The Volkov Library was a cathedral of knowledge. 2 entire walls of oak shelves, brass rolling ladders, stained glass windows at the top, filtering colored light onto thousands of spines. Philosophy, military strategy, history, classic literature. A collection that would take weeks to organize properly. It was humiliating work, intended to show her place. But Saraphina felt something different as she touched the books. Connection. Here were the thoughts that had shaped this man. Here was his soul, more exposed than in any conversation. She spent days immersed in categorization. But at night, when silence swallowed the mansion, she would take down volumes and read. Kant, Nietzsche, Sun Tzu. She discovered notes in the margins in a tight masculine script. Comments, disagreements, epiphanies. That was how he found her one Tuesday, the full moon illuminating the pages of Critique of Pure Reason. You read German? Nikolai was at the door, casual in a waistcoat and rolled-up sleeves, the first time she had seen him without his formal coat. Saraphina didn't look ashamed at being caught. Fluently, also French, Italian, and a little Russian. Something passed through his eyes, surprise, perhaps respect. Kant is heavy reading for a servant, she completed, closing the book gently. Or for a woman, his lips quirked, not quite a smile but close. For anyone, really. Even philosophers struggle with Kant, perhaps because he asks us to think for ourselves. A terrifying concept for most. Nikolai entered the library, hands in his pockets. And what does Miss Winters think about the categorical imperative? About acting only according to maxims that could become universal law? I think, Saraphina stood, facing him, that Kant was never bought as temporary property. It's easy to philosophize about morality when one has the privilege of choice. Touché. He blinked, then gave a short, dry laugh. A fair point, very well. If you're so clever, let's test it. Chess, tomorrow night. If you win, you'll have free access to the library. If you lose, he paused, you will work in the kitchens. Accepted. No hesitation. Confident. Realistic. My father taught me chess before he taught me to walk. For the first time, something almost warm passed over his face. Mine too. The match became an event. Mrs. Caldwell brought tea and biscuits. The fire crackled. They sat across from each other at the marble chessboard, ivory and ebony pieces awaiting commands. Nikolai played like a military commander, aggressive, strategic, merciless. Saraphina played like a dancer, graceful, unpredictable, each move a calculated improvisation. The game stretched for 2 hours. Neither spoke except to announce moves. But there was a deeper conversation happening, in the slide of the pieces on marble, in the rhythm of their breathing, in the rising tension. He took her bishop. She sacrificed a knight to open a flank. He advanced his queen. She set a trap with her pawns. When Saraphina finally announced check, Nikolai looked up, surprised. He studied the board, searching for an escape, finding only encirclement. It wasn't checkmate, but it was close. "Que draw," he finally declared. "I propose a draw." Saraphina leaned back, allowing a small smile. "Accepted. Does this mean I have access to the library?" "It means," he acknowledged grudgingly, "that you will. You play well, as do you." A charged silence. Then Nikolai poured 2 glasses of brandy, offering one to her. A gesture of equality, not servitude. "Why can't?" he asked, genuinely curious. Because he believed in human dignity as an absolute, that people are not means to an end, but ends in themselves. She took a small sip, the liquid burning her throat. A concept that seems forgotten in some modern contracts. Nikolai did not look away. Your father didn't believe in that. To him, people were tools. "I'm not my father. No, you are not." He said it simply. "Then rematch tomorrow night?" "It will be an honor to defeat your grace properly this time." He almost smiled again. Almost. 76 days and the walls were beginning to crack. The chess matches became sacred rituals. Every night after her duties, the library awaited them, a sanctuary where they ceased to be master and servant for a few precious hours, becoming simply intellectual adversaries. But during the games they talked. "What do you think about collective responsibility?" Saraphina asked as she moved her rook. "If one family member commits a crime, is the whole family guilty?" Nikolai took her pawn. "It depends. A crime or a moral sin? Both, I suppose. A hypothetical example. Someone's father destroys another's reputation. Should that person's daughter pay?" She wasn't being subtle. He knew exactly what they were talking about. The Old Testament would say yes. An eye for an eye, generation after generation. He studied the board. The New Testament would offer forgiveness. Turn the other cheek. And what does Nikolai Volkov say? He raised his eyes, meeting hers. In the flickering candlelight, The emotional scars on his face seemed deeper. Nikolai Volkov believed in balanced justice. But recently, he paused, someone has made me question if justice and revenge are really the same thing. And your conclusion? I'm still deciding. He moved his king. Check. She blocked with her bishop. Revenge is trying to fill a hole in your chest with someone else's blood. It never works. It just creates more holes. Poetically said for someone who is paying a debt that isn't hers. I chose this. Choice removes victimization. He tilted his head. Philosophical even under pressure. Impressive. I learned from the best books. From the library of a certain grumpy Russo-English duke. This time he truly smiled. Small, quick, but real. The match ended in his victory. But in the hallway ascending to their respective rooms, Saraphina dared. Sir? He stopped, turned. I'm beginning to understand why you are doing this. The pain you carry. But punishment doesn't bring healing. It only postpones it. Nikolai stood very still. I presume to know my pain. I don't presume. I just recognize. Pain knows pain even through walls. He didn't answer. He simply turned and walked away. But Saraphina saw in the slight slump of his shoulders, in his slower pace, that the words had hit their mark. Good night, Nikolai, she thought without saying it. Tomorrow we continue this battle that neither of us is truly winning. 72 days. The letter arrived on a rainy Tuesday, brought by a nervous messenger. Saraphina opened it with hands that trembled upon recognizing the seal of Newgate Prison. Thomas was sick, high fever. No resources for proper treatment. She ran without thinking of protocols, directly to Nikolai's study. She knocked once and entered. He was on the telephone closing an apparently important deal. He looked up, irritated by the interruption, but upon seeing her face, pale desperation barely contained, he hung up abruptly. What happened? My brother. Her voice trembled. He's sick. I need... Please, sir, allow me to visit him. Just an hour. I beg you. It was the first time. In all these days she had never pleaded, never bowed her head in real supplication. But this was Thomas, her baby brother, whom she had raised after their mother passed, her last piece of family. Nikolai stood circling the desk. Your time belongs to me, every minute of the 90 days. I know. Tears in her eyes now, not falling but threatening. But please, please, if you have any humanity. The word hung in the air. Humanity. The same humanity she had recognized before his mother's portrait, the one he tried to bury under ice. He studied her for a long time. He saw her pride bending, not breaking. He saw genuine love, and something in him, something that had resisted until now, gave way. Prepare yourself. We will go in 30 minutes. We? She blinked, confused. Do you think I trust you to wander free in London? I will go with you, to ensure you return. But they both knew it wasn't about trust. It was about something harder to name. Newgate smelled of despair, urine, and sickness. Saraphina followed the guards with Nikolai silent behind her, his intimidating presence facilitating their passage. Thomas was in a shared cell, lying on damp straw, shivering under a thin blanket. 22 years old, but he looked like a sick child. Sarah, he whispered when he saw her. She knelt beside him, touching his burning forehead. I'm here, Tommy, I'm here. Are you all right? Is he... Thomas looked at Nikolai with fear. I'm fine, she lied softly. Everything will be fine. You'll need to get well, do you hear? Nikolai watched from the doorway. He watched how she murmured comforts, how she adjusted the blanket, how she held her brother's skeletal hand. Unconditional love, sacrifice with no expectation of return. When was the last time someone had loved him like that? Never, his mind whispered cruelly. Your mother loved you, but she chose to leave you. On the way back, neither of them spoke. The carriage rocked on the cobblestones, London passing like a rain-blurred painting. Finally, Nikolai broke the silence. I will arrange for a doctor for your brother. Medicines as well. Saraphina turned so quickly her shawl nearly fell. What? Don't make me repeat myself. His tone was dry, not kind. It is logistically prudent that your family survives. For when the contract ends, a transparent lie. But she didn't challenge him. She just whispered, thank you. He nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude. And in that charged silence between them, something irrevocable changed. The winter was still there, but cracks were beginning to let the light through. 68 days. There will be a ball. Next Saturday. You will attend. The declaration came during breakfast. Saraphina looked up from the toast she wasn't really eating. As a servant? As... Nikolai hesitated, the word visibly costing him a guest. Silence. Mrs. Caldwell nearly dropped the coffee pot. I don't understand, Saraphina said carefully. There will be an appropriate gown. You will be presented to society as... He took a deep breath. As Lady Saraphina Winters under my temporary protection, she read between the lines. This was the original plan, to present her as a conquest, the final public humiliation. But something in his tone suggested the plans had changed. And if I refuse, then I order it. Orders. Always orders. She set her napkin aside. Very well, Your Grace, I will go to your ball. I will wear the gown. I will smile for your guests. I will play my part in the theatre you have orchestrated. He flinched. Just slightly, but she saw it. The gown was winter blue, the color of ice at dusk. French silk, delicate silver embroidery, a modest but elegant neckline. Seraphina touched it with reverence. It had been so long since she had worn something so beautiful. Mrs. Caldwell combed her hair into soft waves, pinning strands with pearl clips. You look stunning, my dear. A lamb to the slaughter, more like. I'm not so sure. The Duke has been acting differently. More human. Human. Seraphina laughed bitterly. What a generous word. But as she descended the main staircase, not the back stairs, the main one for the first time, and saw Nikolai waiting in the foyer in an impeccable tailcoat, something in her chest tightened. He watched her ascend, and for the first time she saw undisguised admiration in his eyes. You look extraordinary, he said softly. Thank you. Formal, guarded. He offered his arm. My lady? Irony or sincerity? Impossible to tell. She accepted. The ballroom was buzzing with London's elite. Crystal chandeliers, an orchestra playing Strauss champagne flowing like a golden river. Seraphina felt all eyes turn as they entered. Whispers. Isn't that Lady Winters? But wasn't she with Volkov? As his... Nikolai guided her through the hall with a firm hand on her back. He was about to make the announcement he had planned, to publicly introduce her as temporary property, the final humiliation. But then he looked at her, really looked. He saw not shame, not brokenness, but absolute dignity. She was there not because she belonged to him, but because she chose to be. And in that choice was a power no contract could capture. He couldn't do it. He simply couldn't. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice cutting through the music, I present to you Lady Saraphina Winters, my guest for this evening. Confusion, murmurs. Seraphina turned to him shocked. He met her eyes. And there, before all of society, he inclined his head. A small gesture. But it was acknowledgement, respect. You won, it said without words. You changed me. The night continued like a dream. They danced. A waltz that was both combat and surrender. Their bodies too close, only technically appropriate. The heat between them was tangible. Why? She whispered as they spun. Because, he replied lowly, I realized the only person being humiliated here would be me. And in the middle of the golden ballroom, surrounded by spectators, they both understood. The game had changed. The rules no longer applied. Something dangerous and wonderful was beginning. 58 days remaining, but a lifetime happening in each one. After the ball, everything changed and nothing changed. Seraphina was still technically a servant. She still slept in the attic, though Nikolai had offered to move her to a better room and she had refused. I don't want favors, she had said. When the time is up, I want to know I survived whole. But meals were now shared. Conversations stretched for hours. The chess matches had an audience of one. Mrs. Caldwell knitting discreetly in a corner, smiling into her patterns. There was still tension. Oh, a growing, almost unbearable tension. Moments where their hands brushed accidentally, and electricity ran. Gazes that lasted too long, breaths that grew uneven. On a stormy night, as the mansion shuddered under thunder, it almost happened. They were in the library discussing Shakespeare, very appropriately Romeo and Juliet. Seraphina argued it was about destructive passion. Nikolai counter-argued it was about transcendent love. True love doesn't destroy, he said intensely, very close to her in the shared armchair. It elevates. Then it wasn't true love. It was obsession. You are too cynical for someone so young, and you are too romantic for someone who claims to be so cold. Thunder exploded. The lights flickered, went out. Total darkness, except for the flames in the fireplace. In the dark, Nikolai touched her face, just touched delicately as if memorizing her contours. Seraphina, his voice was hoarse. No. She grabbed his wrist but didn't remove his hand. Not like this. Not while the contract exists. I could tear it up right now. But then I would always question if it was choice or something more complicated. Her voice trembled. When we are together, if we are, I need to know that we are both completely free to choose. The lights came back on. They pulled apart. But they both knew it was becoming impossible to resist. The countdown was torture now. 46 days. An eternity. A blink of an eye. Lord Sebastian Ashford appeared on a Tuesday morning, uninvited and incredibly inconvenient. "I've come for Lady Winters," he announced to Nikolai with the arrogance of one who has rights. "I heard rumors. I've come to rescue her from this situation." Saraphina came down the stairs upon hearing the commotion. Sebastian was handsome in a conventional way. Blonde hair, an easy smile, and inherited fortune. They had been briefly courted before the Winters family's fall. "Sebastian," she said coolly, "this is unexpected. Sarah." He rushed forward, ignoring Nikolai completely. "A mistake. I've come to offer a solution. Marriage, I will pay the remaining debt. You will be Lady Ashford, free from this degradation." Nikolai stood still as stone. Only his eyes betrayed emotion, virulent jealousy, poorly controlled possessiveness. Saraphina looked from one man to the other. "Sebastian, I appreciate the generous offer, but I refuse." "What?" Sebastian was genuinely shocked. "You choose this? You choose him?" "I choose to honor a commitment I made. I choose to finish what I started. But this is insanity. He's using you." "And you are not?" she asked gently. "Offering marriage to rescue a damsel in distress. Did you think I would be grateful enough to accept just anything?" Sebastian paled. "I do not need rescuing, Sebastian. I never did. Now please go." After he left, huffing indignantly, Nikolai stared at her. "Why did you stay?" "There are still 43 days left." An enigmatic answer, but they both knew the unspoken truth. She stayed because she wanted to, because something precious was growing between them, something that couldn't be rushed or bought. That night, digging through the library, Saraphina found hidden documents. Old letters, evidence. Her heart raced as she read. Lord Blackwood, a third party, a manipulator. He had planted evidence against Lady Elena Volkov, had manipulated her father, Edmund Winters, into making accusations. All to destroy both families over business disputes. Nikolai's revenge was based on a lie. Not entirely, but in large part. She brought the documents to him, hands shaking. "Nikolai," the first time using his name without a title. "You need to see this." He read. A growing pallor. Then fury. Then something worse, emptiness. "My entire life," he whispered, "based on a lie. Not all of it. Your mother still suffered. Your father still—" But the blame wasn't his alone. There were more players. Nikolai collapsed into a chair, head in his hands. Saraphina knelt beside him, gently touching his shoulder. "You are free now!" "Free from the anger, from the revenge, from the past. How can you forgive me?" He looked up, his eyes red. "After what I did? Because forgiveness isn't about the other person deserving it. It's about me being free, too." He pulled her into a tight, desperate hug. Not sexual, just human. Two survivors clinging to each other in the rubble. Forgiveness, Saraphina thought. Perhaps the hardest love of all. 39 days. Time ran strangely now, too fast, too slow simultaneously. Each day was precious and torturous. Nikolai had visibly transformed. He smiled occasionally. He truly laughed sometimes. Mrs. Caldwell commented it was like watching winter melt in fast forward. But Saraphina had nightmares. One night she woke up screaming. She had dreamed of the auction, but distorted. Nikolai buying her repeatedly, never freeing her, forever trapped. He heard from his room and ran. He found her huddled on the narrow bed, trembling. "Saraphina!" He knelt beside the bed. "I did everything right," she whispered, her eyes glazed. "I kept my dignity. I didn't break. But sometimes I feel as if I'll never be free. As if I'll always carry this mark." "God," he whispered, horrified, "I did this to you. I broke you." "No," she held his face, forcing him to look. "You strengthened me. But wounds take time to heal, and sometimes they still hurt." He stayed with her all night, fully dressed, just holding her as she slept restlessly. At dawn, when she woke and saw him there, in an uncomfortable position in the narrow chair watching over her sleep, she realized, this man would guard my dreams without expecting anything in return. This is not possession. This is love. Days later, Sebastian returned, this time with a different proposal. "I have information," he told Saraphina in the garden, away from listening ears, "about Volkov's past. Dirty deals, vendettas, things that could destroy him socially." Saraphina froze. "Help me," Sebastian continued, "and you will have true revenge. He made you suffer. Make him pay." For a moment, just one moment, she considered it. It would be justice, wouldn't it? He had bought her like property, humiliated her, made her serve. But then she remembered the chess matches, the philosophical conversations, the shawl left in the hallway, the doctor for Thomas, the ball where he freed her when he could have broken her. "No," she said firmly. "You're weak. Stockholm has you. No, I've just learned that revenge only perpetuates cycles. Someone has to be strong enough to stop. It will be me. She took the information to Nikolai. Sebastian tried to use me against you. Here are the documents. Do what you think is best. Nikolai held them, then slowly tore them up. I will not lower myself to his level. You taught me better. In that moment, they both knew they had chosen healing over wounds, love over war. 29 days. And counting. 2 days remained. Saraphina woke on the 88th day with a strange feeling, relief mixed with terror. Soon she would be free. But would Nikolai want her, when there was no longer a contract keeping her there? He was waiting for her in the garden, where the rose bushes were finally beginning to be pruned. A new gardener had been hired. The mansion was waking from its self-imposed mourning. I want to show you something, he said. He took her to the locked studio. Inside he revealed a project, the complete restoration of Lady Elena's portrait, not hidden but displayed with honor in the main hall. Beside it, a new portrait was being painted, of Lord Edmund Winters, Saraphina's father. Both flawed, Nikolai explained. Both human. Both deserve to be remembered without hatred. Just as they were, imperfect, trying, failing. Like all of us, Saraphina cried. This is beautiful. You taught me. That carrying hatred only poisons the one who carries it. They stood holding hands, looking at the portraits, the past finally at peace. The future uncertain but possible. Saraphina, he began carefully, when the time is up? No. She placed a finger on his lips. Not now. Ask me when I'm free. Completely free. Then I will know your question comes from choice, not obligation. He kissed the tip of her finger. Chaste, but a promise of more. 2 days, 48 hours. A lifetime compressed into a countdown. Day 89. The penultimate day. Technically, still a servant until midnight the next day. Nikolai called her to the study. He was standing by the window, back to her, shoulders tense. Tomorrow you will be free, he said without turning. But I cannot wait. I cannot let you spend one more day thinking you are here by coercion. He turned, holding papers. The contract. He tore it slowly, methodically, into smaller and smaller pieces. Done, you are free. Now go if you wish. Stay if you desire. But as a free woman, not a prisoner. Saraphina looked at the pieces falling like paper snow. No. He blinked, confused. What? 1 day remains. I agreed to 90 days. I will fulfill 90 days. She approached him. Because when they are over, when they are officially over, you will have no doubts. Neither will I. Saraphina, his voice was hoarse. Ask me tomorrow, when the clock strikes midnight, when I am legally, contractually, absolutely free. Then ask me, and I will answer. Nikolai let out a strangled laugh, somewhere between desperation and admiration. You are the most stubborn person I have ever met. I learned from the best. The night of the 89th day was the longest of their lives. Saraphina did not sleep. Nikolai didn't either. Both in their rooms, counting the hours, minutes, seconds, thinking, feeling, fearing, hoping. 24 hours to freedom, and everything that comes after. The 90th day dawned with golden light, winter finally yielding to the promise of spring. Saraphina woke and out of habit began her usual tasks. But today was different. The last day. She spent the hours in a kind of trance. Breakfast with Nikolai, a charged silence. A walk in the garden, each flower seeming to mean something. Reading in the library, words dancing without making sense. Mrs. Caldwell prepared a special dinner, though no one really ate. The clock in the hall ticked like a bomb. At 11 at night, Saraphina went down to find Nikolai in the main hall. He was standing by the fireplace, staring into the flames, as if seeking answers there. 10 minutes remain, she said softly. He turned. He had never looked so vulnerable. The feared duke reduced to a man simply waiting for an answer to a question he hadn't yet asked. The clock began to strike. Bong, bong, bong. On the 12th chime it was midnight, silence. And now? Saraphina asked, echoing the words he himself had said 90 days ago. Nikolai, in a move that shocked them both, knelt. Not arrogantly, not performatively, humble, real. Now, he said, his voice broken, I ask if you will stay. Not because you belong to me, you never did, I see that now. But because, he took a deep breath, because I belong to you. In these 90 days you taught me what I never knew. That loving is not possessing, it is freeing. That strength is not dominating, it is serving. Tears ran down his face, unashamed. I am no longer the man who bought you. I am the man you taught me to be. And that man begs, not orders, begs, that you consider staying, not as my servant, my possession, but as my equal, my partner. If you love me. His voice failed. God, I pray that you love me. Saraphina let the silence hang, tasted it. This moment she had survived 90 days for. She touched his face. "Stand up, Nikolai." He obeyed, trembling. "You want to know if I love you?" she asked gently. A minimal nod. "I hated you. Then I hated you less. Then I began to understand you, to respect you. And then, without realizing when it happened," she smiled through her own tears, "I began to love you. Not the Duke, not the powerful man, but the man who cries for his mother, who reads Count at midnight, who held back when he could have taken, who freed me when he could have kept me prisoner." She paused, holding both his hands. "I will stay, not because you asked, but because I want to, as your equal, as your partner, as the woman who loves you despite everything, or perhaps because of everything." Nikolai pulled her into a hug that contained 90 days of broken restraint. They kissed finally. Not possession, not conquest, but recognition. Two souls who had walked through hell and chosen in the end love instead of ashes. When they parted, both laughing and crying simultaneously, Mrs. Caldwell appeared with champagne and a knowing smile. "I always knew," she murmured. The winter was melting. 1 year later, the Volkov mansion was unrecognizable. Gardens bloomed exuberantly. Open windows let in light. Laughter, real, frequent, echoed through the hallways that had once known only silence. The portraits of Lady Eleanor and Lord Edmund hung side by side in the main hall, not hidden, not forgotten, remembered as the humans they were, flawed, trying, sometimes failing, but worthy of remembrance without hatred. Thomas, recovered and redeemed, visited often. He had developed an unlikely friendship with Nikolai, two men united by the woman they loved, each in his own way. And Saraphina, Lady Saraphina Volkov now. They had married in a simple ceremony. She wore no veil, symbolizing she was not property. They stood side by side at the altar, equals. When they exchanged vows, Nikolai said, "You freed me on the day I imprisoned you." Saraphina replied, "And you freed me on the day you let me go." It wasn't a fairy tale. There were difficult days, occasional nightmares, scars that ached on rainy days. But there was also mornings with coffee and quiet conversation, chess matches that neither cared about winning, walks in the restored garden, nights where they simply held each other, marveling that they had survived their own winters. Mrs. Caldwell, present on their 1-year anniversary, commented, "I've never seen such a transformation. It's like magic." "Not magic," Seraphina corrected gently, looking at Nikolai crossing the garden with a book in his hands, an easy smile on the face that had once known only ice. "Just choice. Every day, choosing to be better together than we were apart. Choosing love when it would be easier to choose the wound." She touched her lightly rounded belly. A small life beginning, the fruit not of possession, but of genuine choice. 90 days, she murmured to herself. 90 days was how long it took to turn winter into spring, to turn hatred into love, to turn a prison into freedom. Nikolai arrived, kissed her temple. "What are you thinking about?" "About new beginnings, about second chances, about how sometimes we need to lose ourselves completely to truly find ourselves." He laced his fingers with hers. "You found me. We found each other, finally." And in the garden where the rose bushes bloomed once more, where the past rested in peace and the future unfolded with tenuous but real hope, two souls who had walked through the harshest winter finally allowed themselves to believe spring was not just possible, it was real. And it was here, Toste,